You all, we are living in basically the fantasy of my 13-year-old self, because what is this? What is this I have gazed my eyes upon this morning? So if you don't know what I'm talking about what appears to be, I guess, a snippet of a meet event that some of the producers from Shao Generations did in Indonesia. Sounds very random, but this comes from Tails channel. So, you know, Tails channel, we can trust them, yada, yada, yada. But during this meetup, they had a lot of different questions and they talked about a lot of things regarding the Sonic franchise. But the one teensy tiny thing, which is not teensy at all if it were to actually happen, is one of the producers went on and said that they would be interested in remaking the oh so glamorous Sonic 06. Now, he didn't say this directly from what I see. He said that any old game was on the table and Sonic 06 was just a part of that conversation. He also allegedly said this before in a previous interview, so I must have completely missed that because this is just news to me. Now, of course, this is obviously nothing confirmed. You know, if it was truly something that they were working on, then I don't think they would just be willy-nilly talking about it like this unless they're trying a new marketing strategy. But the fact is, there's likely no such thing as a Sonic 06 remake in the works right now. But as always, it got the brain a knocking, it got the brain a kicking, it got the brain a moving, a moaning, just doing everything it possibly can, because a Sonic 06 remake, words that I don't think will ever leave my mouth in an official capacity. But if you think about it, a Sonic 06 remake would be one of the most epic and attention-seeking things that this franchise could ever do. Conventionally attractive humans, my name is RidersDX, and today we're going to talk about the possibility of a Sonic 06 remake, how it could possibly look, and why I think this would actually be one of the smartest decisions that Sega could ever make, especially given the quality of the recent Shao Generations. And so let's first rewind a little bit and just kind of briefly go over what Sonic 06 is, because, you know, I'm pretty sure everyone here in the room is aware of what Sonic 06 is and what happened with it, but just to set the scene, just to cleanse your palate a little bit and let some of the poison in. Sonic 06 was one of the most defining games of this franchise, whether you like it or not. Sonic 06 came at one of the most pivotal times in this franchise where it really seemed like Sonic could go one way or the other. After a decade of really dominating the gaming industry with games like the original classic Sonic games or Sonic Adventure, Sega went for a hard dive down with the failure of the Sega Dreamcast, and as a result, Sonic became a third-party franchise. And since he became a third-party franchise, he didn't have the best track record, if we're gonna be honest. I mean, the adventure games were ported over to GameCube, and those got sort of mediocre / mixed reviews. Sonic Heroes came out, and that did okay, but it also got some mixed reviews. Then we had Shao the Hedgehog and Sonic Riders, and those games were not received as well either. And it was just starting to seem like Sonic was losing his grip. He was starting to lose the ground that he was running on. He was starting to drown. He was starting to flail in the air. Like, what was going on with Sonic? And so, me being someone that grew up with Sonic during this time, my very first Sonic game was Sonic Heroes. So I jumped into the franchise right in this period. And I vividly remember seeing the very first footage of Sonic 06, and I think it was at the Tokyo Game Show that they showed it at, and it showed off what I assume is CGI footage because this looks nothing like the actual game. So I'm like, maybe this is just like either a tech demo or it was crafted CGI footage. Like, I don't know, I don't remember, but I remember seeing this for the very first time and being completely wowed by what I was seeing, because it felt like Sonic was being reborn. It felt like he was entering a new era of prosperity, and this project just looked to push Sonic to the maximum potential of the next generation consoles. And this was back during a time where like each generation of consoles was a much more dramatic step in technology compared to now. I mean, the graphics from the Xbox to the Xbox 360 was pretty significant. It's not like now where there's barely any difference, you can't tell. And Sonic 06 definitely looked like it was going to push Sonic in the greatest direction that he possibly could go in. And I was hyped. I was excited. I could not wait to get my hands on this game. As the months and even a year would pass by, we would get drip fed more and more info about this game. And, you know, despite some of the warning signs, the game still looked pretty good to me. It looked pretty exciting, and I was really excited to get my hands on it. I even remember when the demo came out on the Xbox 360 marketplace, I remember staying up to like 3 a.m. waiting waiting for that demo to download to my console, and I played it at like 4 a.m. before I had to go to sleep. I'm pretty sure this was a school night too, so I guess my parents just didn't notice that I was still up. I was a pretty quiet kid, so I probably just got away with it. But I remember playing that demo, and it was the very first section of Kingdom Valley, so that section that they kept showing off at various game conventions, and I was in love. Like, this was feeling great. This was the next generation of Sonic. I was really excited for this game. So of course, when the actual game comes out and all that happens, I was pretty much in denial for like a good 3 months. I was playing the game and I was like, you know what, this isn't the best game in the world, but it still has a lot of things I like about it, and it's still Sonic's next big step, and I was a fan. Like, I was defending this game. I think I gave like an 8 out of 10 when it first came out on like GameSpot. So I was in the trenches, I was a warrior, I was defending Sonic, I was hand-hearting all the way. Sonic 06 was my game of the year. Of course, reality started to sink in, and as I kept playing the game, I couldn't deny the issues that were staring me right in the face, that were whacking me, that were giving me concussions, that were pushing me off the cliff. This game was not good. It was not a good game. And it was a little heartbreaking to really like let that sink into me eventually, because it was a game that I had so much hype for, so much hope for, and me being like a brand new Sonic fan, I had never experienced Sonic being in a golden age yet, because my entire time with Sonic so far was just filled with titles that were being, you know, critically like scrutinized in so many different ways, and I just never saw Sonic as the top dog. And Sonic 06, unfortunately, beyond my mindset back then, would go on to be one of the most defining moments of this franchise, because it led Sonic down a path that he still hasn't fully recovered from yet. Like, unfortunately, people do not forget a terrible game. People might forget a great game, to be honest, because it doesn't take up as much like mental real estate. But a terrible game, a game especially like Sonic 06 that had so much hype behind it and was going to be like the next big defining game of the franchise, it certainly was the next big defining game of the franchise, but not in the way that Sega would have ever hoped for. And so Sonic 06 would go on to just leave this aroma for years and years to come, and it is constantly being cited as the time, the point, the moment that Sonic lost, that Sonic was just losing it, that Sonic was gone. And it's only in recent years I feel like we're finally shaking off that image. I mean, we thought we were close to shaking it off with Colors and Generations, sure, but it was still like a heavy aroma, heavy scent that was just clouding our judgment. And it didn't help that some of the games afterwards only brought us back into that space. But games like Mania, Frontiers, and now Shadow Generations, these games are not only pushing Sonic into a better critical light, but these are games that are actually embracing or taking in some of the elements from Sonic 06 and actually making them good. And I believe it is through games like Frontiers and Shadow Generations in particular, which are games that are directly taking ideas from Sonic 06 and making them parts of the franchise now and doing well with it. That's become the ultimate way to finally start getting over what happened with Sonic 06, because instead of just like blindly ignoring and pushing out anything that game was doing, we are actually embracing some of the ideas that Sonic 06 brought to the table and making them good and making them an integral part of who Sonic is. And so now we get to the question at hand, which is what would happen with a Sonic 06 remake? So I think a Sonic 06 remake would be one of the most dramatic and poetic things this franchise could ever do. Think about it. Think about Sonic Team going back to the coffin, going back to the tomb, extravagating everything about Sonic 06 that worked, that didn't work, and trying to piece it all together into a functioning title that can be sold in today's market. Think about the kind of impact, the kind of headlines, the kind of attention something like that would get Sonic and Sega. This would be one of the most defining moments of the Sonic franchise, because if Sega and Sonic Team can go back to Sonic 06, remake it, or even reimagine it into something that's brilliant or even just decent to good, that would almost help to erase the impact of Sonic 06. It would help people to shift their minds, because now if this game were to be made and to come out and to be good, if people thought about Sonic 06, they wouldn't just think about the original. They would think about the remake. They would think about the reimagined title, and it would help to soften the impact of that game and the negativity that it ensued on this franchise for who knows how many more years to come. A Sonic 06 revisit would be one of the smartest and most impactful things they could do at this point. Because yes, I mean, I think we're all getting sick of nostalgia at this point, but remaking a good game is one thing. So I'm like, okay, we want to remake Sonic Adventure 2. I understand why. I personally would want to see that more because those games are older and also those are games I love more. So I would love to see them in a modern slate. But a Sonic 06 remake, that would just be shocking, and that would just be a remake in a whole different way because they're remaking something that was bad, that did a lot of damage to this franchise, and they're basically reclaiming what that game did to them and almost just fixing it and just making it not as impactful anymore. And that's why I believe if we're gonna remake an old 3D platformer of Sonic's, I think I would choose Sonic 06 over anything else because I just think that would just be the most poetic and most biggest comeback kind of thing that they could do in this moment. And it would just be so great to see Sonic 06 fully realized and really get the moment that it was robbed of because of poor management, of poor working conditions, of just a bad time in the Sonic franchise overall, that it was an environment that Sonic 06 was never going to prosper in. Now, this is very unlikely. It's very unlikely that a Sonic 06 remake would ever be considered by Sega or Sonic Team. It is just not an obvious idea, and it's a little bit too risky as well. And I don't think Sega has any interest in revisiting the negative parts of the franchise beyond just like the occasional reference or even the inclusion of Kingdom Valley and Shadow Generations. Like, there's no interest in that from Sega's point, and I would understand why. But if they did do it, it could actually make a lot of sense in terms of what else could be going on in the franchise. One thing that I'm going to make a video about in the near future is Silver. I think Silver is poised to become one of the most popular characters in the next few years because we're already seeing a bunch of discussion of who should be the next big character to be introduced in the movies after Shadow, and Silver, to my surprise, is getting a lot of support. You know, probably the most support out of anyone. No more than like heavyweights like Amy Rose, for instance. And I think Silver just has certain qualities to him that make him a really likable character. And it's also just this whole aura of Silver was completely mismanaged when Sonic 06 came out and robbed of his potential. Silver as a character has a really great setup and a very interesting background, and he's also got great interesting powers to utilize as well. And there's just a lot of potential with Silver as a character. And if the Sonic movie franchise was going to go in the direction of introducing him into the next movie, then a Sonic 06 remake or reimagining to be coupled along with that movie release would make a lot of sense and would fit in pretty well and would also garner a lot of attention because, like I said, revisiting Sonic 06 in that way would be more interesting and more impactful than pretty much anything else they could do, because it's one thing to remake a game that people love, but to remake a game that people hate and attempt to make it a game that people love, that would just be really ballsy and really fascinating and really interesting and something I would love to see. And another reason that this is such a great idea in my head is because we've already sort of seen what that looks like, and that is through Project 06, developed by Chaos X. Like, okay, this is one of the greatest Sonic fan projects that's ever existed, hands down. Maybe my favorite one ever, to be honest, because when I play through this project and I play through all these levels, I get reminded of what all the good things about Sonic 06 was. I get reminded of all the potential. I get reminded of that 13-year-old kid that was watching that TGS trailer and getting super excited about what Sonic 06 could mean for the franchise. This is Sonic 06 fully realized as what it is supposed to be. And sure, it's not the full-on game, like you don't have the hub world yet, it's not connected to the storylines and stuff, but nonetheless, from a gameplay perspective, this is what Sonic 06 should have been like, and it would have been received pretty well if it played like this. So you already have the foundations of a Sonic 06 remake over here. So Sega has worked with fan developers in the past, Sonic Mania for instance, so it is not completely out of their wheelhouse to take in someone like Chaos X, work off the foundations of his project and make it a full-fledged title. Although I do think it'd be a lot more interesting if instead of remaking it, they reimagined it, because of course, as great as Chaos X did with this project, I think there's just a lot of foundational things about Sonic 06 that would need to be changed to be a great game in this era. I do think a lot of the story needs to be revamped, and I do think a lot of the gameplay, a lot of the level design, and I think Silver as a whole kind of needs to be revamped as well, because he is just too different from what Sonic is supposed supposed to be. I think they need to make Silver more closely related to the gameplay of Sonic / Shadow Generations. And I just think his telekinetic abilities in Sonic 06 as it is just too different of a gameplay style to fit into that. So they definitely would need to rework him to make him work in a modern context. And that's why I think a reimagining, you know, sort of like what they did with Final Fantasy VII would be really, really great for Sonic 06. You know, start from scratch. Start with a blank slate and just make it into the game that it was supposed to be. And I just think that that idea is too great and too amazing, and I want to see it happen. I really want to see it happen. And the fact that they did such a good job with Shadow Generations gives me a lot of faith in the current team that we have. And it gives me a lot of faith in Sega as well, because they're finally starting to see the importance of putting out good games, putting out games that are going to get people talking in a positive way. And I just think remaking Sonic 06 and reclaiming the reputation of that game would be such a badass boss move that Sega could do right now. So that is my pitch. That is my plea to Sega. The thousands of people that are talking about Silver isn't enough to convince you. I hope that this does. If the popularity of Sonic P06 isn't enough to convince you, I hope that this last minute plea is, because this is a great idea. And the time to start would be now, because if you put it out in time for Sonic 06's 20th anniversary, like, again, the poetry writes itself. The poetry writes itself. This is a fairy tale. This would literally be a fairy tale, a story I would read to my kids. So yeah, those are my thoughts. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. What do you all think about the potential of a Sonic 06 remake / remaster / reimagining? I would hope it'd be a reimagining, but we would have to see. And feel free to subscribe to me for more hot topic discussions like this. But all right, y'all, I hope you have a lovely day. Have some great holidays. This is Riders, riding out.